Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction and welcome back to my channel. So today I am going to be tier ranking every single fantasy romance book I read in 2022. Alright guys, so before we jump into the tier rank, let me explain how this video is going to work. So I will be discussing about 30 fantasy romance books that I read this year. I'm going to give a very, very brief synopsis of every book just so you have an idea what the book is about and if you'd want to pick it up. And I'll be tier ranking them from 1 star to 5 stars. So this should be really fun. I will say there are a couple paranormal romances and monster romances thrown in, but for the most part, it's fantasy romance. So I am so excited to talk about these books with you guys. Now, if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit the notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram and Goodreads, both linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about all of the fantasy romance books I read this year. Alright guys, so welcome to the tier rank. So I am going to be ranking this by stars, which is something I don't normally do. It just seemed like the easiest way to do this. So we have 5 stars, which is like the perfect read. I loved everything about it. 4 stars, still really good, really enjoyed it. 3 stars, kind of middle of the road. I would still recommend it. It just wasn't one of my absolute favorites. 2 stars, which is where we're getting kind of negative. For some reason, this book didn't work for me. And then 1 star, where I just did not enjoy it. So, starting off, these are in no particular order. Tiermaker just kind of randomizes them. So, we're going to start with To Bleed a Crystal Bloom. This was a surprise read for me. I didn't know anything about it going into it, and I really, really enjoyed it. This is following this girl who, when she is very young, her family is killed in this massacre, and this man ends up stumbling upon her, takes her back to his castle where he raises her in isolation, and all he asks in return is a drop of her blood every night. So I had no idea what was really going on with this book until I was like 90% into it, and I still have so many unanswered questions. The sequel has come out. I think it was just released on audio to Snap a Silver Stem, so I'll definitely be reading it soon. But I'm actually going to put this in 5 star. This was one of my top reads of the year. I loved it. It had romance, fantasy. It was perfect. So definitely enjoyed it. Ooh, next up we have The War of Two Queens. So this is kind of controversial. Some people really love this. Some people really hated it. There's a certain scene that a lot of people had an issue with. Personally, I was team that thing. I was totally okay with it. My issue with this book is I feel like the hero, Castile, kind of didn't feel as like powerful as he did in other books. I feel like he lost a lot of his personality, which is upsetting because we did get his point of view in this book. So that is my issue with this book. But overall, I still liked it. I enjoyed the story. I am going to put this with 4 stars. Oops. Yeah, so I'm going to put it with 4 stars, mostly just because I feel like the writing wasn't up to par, and I didn't love what happened with Castile, and I just wanted a little bit more from him. But overall, still enjoyable. All right, next up, we have The Never King, which is like a spicy fantasy romance Peter Pan reimagining, where the descendants of Wendy Darling are kidnapped by Peter Pan on their 18th birthday and taken to Neverland. So it is White Shoes, reverse harem, very fun. I'll put this in 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't super impactful, like it's not a book I think about very often, but it was fun while I was reading it. Okay, so next up we have The Unseelie Prince. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't remember 90% of this book. I just remember that I was very bored while reading it, and I didn't love the love interest. I believe the main character is a witch who ends up making a deal with like the Prince of Hell, but she doesn't realize he's like the prince, or maybe the prince of the Unseelie court. And she has to go through these trials in order to escape. I only read the first book in the series, and it just, I didn't like it. It's between 2 and 1 star. I think I'll put it in 2. I'm sure there are people out there that would enjoy this. Personally, it just wasn't for me. All right, next up we have Untainted by Lillian T. James, which I remember loving while I was reading it, but this is another one where I actually forget a lot of the premise. So I believe this is following, I do remember this. This is following a person that is kidnapped when she is very young to the point that she forgets what she really is or who she really is until a fae stranger comes and kind of like changes her world, and it kind of explains things to her. I feel like that wasn't a very good summary at all of this book, but I did really enjoy this book while I was reading it. So I am going to give it 3 stars. I believe the sequel, oops, I'm having trouble using my mouse today, guys. I believe the sequel is about to be released. Very excited. I do also remember this book wasn't super spicy. It was pretty tame. I think there's only one like spicy scene. So if you read fantasy romance for the spice, you might not like this as much. But overall, it was pretty good. All right, next up. Next up, we have The Beast by Jerika Snow. So this is monster romance. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling novella where the Beast does not transform into a man. Instead, Belle and the Beast have a relationship. It has breeding kink. I think I rated this 2.5 stars. It was a lot, super spicy. I'm personally not a huge fan of monster romances, which is probably why I didn't like it. I'll put it with 2. It was, I'm sure there are going to be people out there that liked it. Personally, it just wasn't for me. Same with the second book, The Hunter. The Hunter I actually think I'm going to put with 1 star. I rated it 2.5 when I read it, but like, it was a wild time. So the Hunter is following a wolf who ends up kidnapping this girl, and they have a relationship, but he never turns into a human. It's not a werewolf romance. He is just a full wolf, and there's like breeding kink, and it was a lot. Not a fan. So that I'm going to put in 1 star. I think I like The Beast a little bit more. Then next up we have I Married a Lizard Man. So this was one of the first monster romances I ever read. I have a full reading monster romances for the first time vlog I will leave in the cards and in the description. I actually liked this. This was a lot more like emotional and cute than I thought it was going to be. So I'm going to put this on 3 stars. It was cute. Not enough for me to go back and continue with the series, but it just wasn't what I was expecting and I really liked it. All right. Next up, we have What Lies Beyond the Veil. So I love this book. I've recommended it to a lot of people. Some people aren't a huge fan of it. I get it. Going back and rereading it, which I recently did, I do see a couple problems. The biggest issue I think is it is predictable. The big twist at the end, I feel like a lot of people can guess, but I still really enjoyed it. So we're following this girl that lives in this society where there is a veil that separates the humans from the Fae. And to keep this veil going, this community sacrifices a human. So our main character is picked to be sacrificed, but right before she is about to the Fae veil like ruptures and all of the Fae come spilling out and they start hunting the humans. And it's her story and it's just, I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. So I'm gonna put this with 4 stars only because I do think it was predictable. The writing isn't great, but I really loved it. All right, next up, A King So Cold by Ella Fields. This is going straight to 5 stars. I loved this book. So this is like very hard to summarize, but we're following this queen, and at the beginning of the story, we find out that her husband has been exiled, and there is this whole other like country that's about to go to war with her, and we realize why her husband has been exiled. Someone finds her husband, and her husband has no memory of her. So this is a very cold character, and we get to see kind of like an evil character, why she is the way she is, and it starts to make perfect sense why everyone perceives her as being so evil and why she is so mean. It's because of everything that's gone on in her life. And I love this. It also is a love triangle and probably one of the best love triangles I have ever read. So A King So Cold, and then I think I have the second book on here. Let's see. I do. So A King So Cold and The Stray Prince, they are both going to go in 5 stars. Favorite fantasy romance duology, 100%. Check it out. Really, really good. All right, so next up we have A King of Battle and Blood, and this is by Scarlett St. Clair. So I am going to put this in 3 star. Oops, I'm really having trouble. I'm going to put this in 3 stars only because it kind of lacked like angst for me. So this is following Isolde, and she is I think she's like a princess, but she's like the daughter of the human king. And there is this vampire king that has just been taking over all of the different houses and all of the different kingdoms. So her people want her to marry this vampire king and then kill him. So that is her plan. Unfortunately, her and the vampire king have this like instant connection, and they start kind of messing around right away, which is why I wasn't as huge of a fan of this as I thought I was going to be. I like enemies to lovers with like a lot of angst, and like they're trying to fight the fact that they both really like each other, and that didn't really happen here. They just kind of like got together and that was it. So not a huge fan. It was still enjoyable, so 3 stars. All right, next up is The Dragon's Bride by Katee Robert, another monster romance. And this was pretty good. Like I'll 3 star this as well. This is following this girl who is in a very abusive relationship, so she makes a deal with a demon that if the demon kills her husband, she will go to like the demon world and be the wife of a monster for 7 years. And the way time works, like she doesn't actually age during this time, so when she goes back to the human world, she'll be like the normal age. Anyway, I digress. So she ends up being selected in this like bidding war to be married off to a dragon, and it is their love story. And similar to I Married a Lizard Man, it was just cute. Like, I really enjoyed it. I thought the romance was adorable. So yeah, it was a good time. All right, next up, we have A Light in the Flame. So this is the second book after A Shadow in the Ember, which is the companion series to From Blood and Ash. I enjoyed this. Not 5 stars. I think I'm gonna give it, oh, do I wanna give this 4 stars or 5 stars? I'm gonna give this 4 stars only because I feel like this was very, very character driven. It did not need to be as long as it was in terms of pacing, so the pacing was slow, but I do love what they did with the characters, and I love the story, possibly more than From Blood and Ash. I think I might actually end up liking this companion series a little bit more, but I did enjoy it. I just think it had some pacing issues. I'm not going really into plot because it's gonna give away a bunch of spoilers, but overall, 4 stars. If you like the first book, A Shadow in the Ember, I think you will like A Light in the Flame. All right, next up is Entreat Me by Grace Draven. This is between 4 and 5. I think I might actually give it 5, only because it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but it's unlike any other Beauty and the Beast retelling like I've ever read. It does have nods to the original cartoon, but it also feels so unique. So we're following these 2 women that are kind of in a relationship with a father and a son that are cursed. And it's just, I really enjoyed it. So it is by Grace Draven. This is also the author of Radiance, which is one of my favorite, not enemies to lovers, I guess like opposites attracts romances. So definitely, if you want a Beauty and the Beast retelling that is spicy and just action-packed, I would check out Entreat Me. It was really good. All right, next up, Dance with the Fae Prince. This is gonna go into 2 stars. I didn't really enjoy this. I enjoyed it, it just wasn't stand out to me. So this is following this girl who is living with her stepmother. Her father has passed away. Her stepmother treats her terribly and ends up marrying her off to this lord. So when she gets there and starts living with this lord, he has one rule, and that's that our main character can't look upon him. So they get along pretty well, and then one day our main character goes off in the woods and she sees this like ritual, and she ends up accidentally stealing the magic that is coming out of this ritual. And then she finds out that her husband's actually a Fae prince, and they have to go to the Fae lands to get this magic out of her. So it's their story. The thing is with Elise Kova's writing, while I'm reading it, I'm kind of enjoying it, but the stories are very forgettable. I feel like I never feel like the characters really connect, and I didn't love it. I do really want to read the vampire novel, which is part of the same series. I've heard good things about it, so I'm gonna give it one more chance, and then I'll probably like give up on Elise Kova. I also read A Deal with the Elf King. I like that a little bit more than this, but still, I think I only rated that like 3.5 stars. So it was okay. All right, next up we have A Shadow in the Ember. This is the first book in the From Blood and Ash, or first book in the Kingdom of Flesh and Fire series, and I liked it. I'm also gonna put this with 4 stars. I probably would have put it with 5 stars had I not just reread it and found a lot of spelling issues, not necessarily spelling issues. It was just like the writing she uses, or Jennifer Armentrout uses current day phrases in fantasy, and I've realized that is something I do not like. It really takes me out of the fantasy story. So, for example, our main character says something to the extent of, oh, that lives rent-free in my head, and that is just such a modern day phrase that I don't love when that happens. But overall, I still really enjoyed the story. If you want me to recap it, I have a whole A Shadow in the Ember recap video I will leave in the cards and in the description before you read A Light in the Flame. That was released this year. All right, next up, we have A River of Shadows by Karina Halle. This had pretty negative reviews, I feel like. I think it had under 3.5, so I was really worried about going into it. I enjoyed it. I do see there is a bit of a disconnect between the first half of the book and the second half of the book. The first half of the book is following this girl. She is attending her estranged father's funeral, and then she finds out that her father might not actually be dead, but he's really a shaman, and she has to go to the land of the dead in order to, like, find him and save him. So it's really a journey between the shaman's, like, protege and our main character, going through the land of the dead, meeting all of these people and these creatures, and then when she gets there and she meets, like, the Hades character, it kind of goes more into, like, a Beauty and the Beast retelling, where he's holding her captive, and I think they start to, like, fall in love. So the second book in this was recently released. I definitely am going to check that out before I, like, completely pass judgment. But I enjoyed this. I thought it was pretty good. Did I think it was good enough to be in 4 stars, though? Ooh, this is tough. I'm gonna put it in 4. It's definitely, like, 3.5. It might end up getting dropped down to 3. All right, next up. Daughter of No World. So, this is very, very beloved right now. A lot of people, this is their new favorite fantasy romance book. Personally, for me, I enjoyed it. I thought it was very well written. It was very unique. I just wanted a little bit more romance. So this is following this girl, I believe her name's Tasana, and she is taken by slavers when she's a child. She's forced to perform this, like, performative magic, and she's trying to buy her freedom. And when she finally earns enough to buy her freedom, she goes to her master and he refuses and he almost kills her. She is able to escape, and she ends up escaping to this order of people that it's kind of like a magical government. If you've read Full Metal Alchemist, it really reminds me of, like, Colonel Mustang and all of that. So she goes there, asks for help to free her people, and she has to, like, go through all of these trials to become a member. And then she ends up meeting this, like, grumpy curmudgeon type character who used to be, like, one of the top military leaders, and he kind of trains her and they slowly fall in love. So the thing with the story is it is friends to lovers, which is not a trope I really enjoy. I just felt like I wanted more romance. And that's probably because I've been reading way too much romance recently, but I wanted a little bit more romance. There was a lot of politics and things going on, which I think were very well done. Personally, just wasn't for me. I am going to continue with this series because so many people love it, and I feel like if I continue, I will also fall in love with it. I've only read the first book, but the first book I'm going to put with 4 stars. Had there been a little bit more angsty romance, it probably would be in 5. So next up, we have a YA fantasy, I guess YA paranormal romance that I had such low expectations going into, and I loved it. This book is very similar to Twilight. So if you did not like Twilight, you will probably hate this book. It is the Blackwater Pack series. So this is Sanctum. I'm actually going to put this in 4 stars. This is following, I forget the main character's name, but she's this girl. She's living in this very abusive pack. Her mother and her are, like, the lowest members of this pack, and they are being kind of, like, sexually assaulted. So although this is YA, there are very upsetting and dark themes that happen throughout this book. I don't think it's really appropriate for very young readers. But anyway, her and her mother are able to escape this pack. They end up going to the Blackwater Pack, and the main character starts to have a relationship with the next alpha, or the next alpha in line. Anyway, it was really good. It gave me all of the Twilight vibes that I didn't know I wanted, and I think I read the first 2 books in a day and a half. They were just amazing. So I still have to read the rest of the series. I've only read the first 2 because they're the only ones available via audio, but when that 3rd one's available, I'm gonna read it. So highly, highly recommend if you like werewolf romances. All right, moving on. Her Soul to Take by Holly LaRoe. So this is like a demon romance, and this is another one. I don't know. I think I'm gonna put it in 4 stars. I liked it. It had all of, like, the creepy vibes. So when I first started this book, I thought I was gonna hate it. We're following this girl. She wants to be, like, a paranormal YouTuber, and she's really obsessed with, like, the occult. So she moves back to her hometown. She's also described as looking exactly like Velma from Scooby-Doo. She moves back to her hometown, and crazy things start happening. So she ends up meeting this guy. Right away, she kind of has a weird vibe, and it turns out he's actually a demon. And he's a demon working for a cult that is in this hometown that actually wants to sacrifice our main character. So finding a grimoire in her library, our main character is able to summon the same demon, who then helps her. They also kind of have, like, a BDSM relationship, and it was good. I thought the creepy vibes of this book were on point. This is a great book to read around Halloween. There's, like, a Cthulhu-type character at the end, and it was just creepy, but also spicy, and I really liked it. I do want to read the 2nd book. I just bought the audio, so I'll probably read that a little bit later this year. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. All right, Electric Idol by Katee Robert. So this was kind of a disappointment. I'm going to put this, I think I'm going to put this in 2 stars. So this is the second book after, the Hades book, Neon Gods. So I didn't love Electric Idol. This is fake dating. I honestly forget the name of the gods that we're following. I think one's Psyche. I forget the other one. But they end up being in this fake dating relationship where they eventually become a couple. And the world building in this series is just really messy. And I feel like I loved the Hades romance, Neon Gods. I just loved that relationship so much that I could let the world building and everything going on kind of slide. That didn't happen in this book. I didn't love the romance, and I also didn't understand exactly what was happening. It was just, I wasn't a fan. So I probably won't continue with this series, unfortunately. But yeah, so I'm going to give that 2 stars. All right, next up is Hollow Heathens, which is going between 4 and 5 stars. I'm putting it in 4. It's really like 4.5. I did have some like transition issues throughout this book where like I was questioning how things actually worked. But the romance is so good. So this is written by Nicole Fiorina, who's the same author of the Stay With Me series, which is one of my favorite series. So this is following a girl whose father passes away, and her only family she has remaining is her grandfather that she's never actually met, but she stayed in contact with via letters. And then one day she gets a letter from her grandfather saying, hey, I need your help. I'm really sick. Could you move in with me? So she decides to move back to her hometown, which she's never been before since she was a baby. And right away when she gets there, the grandfather's like, I didn't send that letter. Why are you here? You need to leave. It turns out that she can't leave when she tries, and she also finds out that this entire town is comprised of different witch covens, and it goes from there. She ends up meeting this boy who's wearing a mask, and immediately is super intrigued by him, and it is their relationship. It's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet reimagining that's dark with witches, and I really enjoyed that. All right. Next up is Wolf Song by TJ Klune, 5 stars. 5 stars. I loved it. One of my favorite books of all time. So good. So this is following, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget their names. I do forget their names. It's following this boy who has grown up with his father pretty much telling him that life is going to give him shit. He's not going to be anything, and he's not important. So he really has this like ingrained in his mind. So as our main character is growing up, he ends up working at this auto shop for this guy named Gordo, who kind of becomes like his parental figure that he looks up to. And he's just kind of getting by in life. And then one day when he's a teenager, he's walking home, he sees this 10-year-old boy, and this boy cannot stop talking and immediately brings our main character home to meet his family. And we find out that 10-year-old boy hadn't spoken for 2 years before meeting the main character. And it's their romance spanning a few years. We also find out that 10-year-old boy is the next alpha in line in this werewolf pack, and his entire family is werewolves. And it also has like a whole found family feel. It was so, so good. I loved it. I cried. I will say the beginning is kind of slow, but I feel like it needs to be slow in order for you to really appreciate the romance. And it was so good. Highly recommend. Pick up Wolf Song. One of my faves. All right. Next up, we have King of Flesh and Bone. I have strong feelings about this book. I'm going to put it in 2 stars, but I think you should read it just so you can experience it. This is a very dark romance, by the way. We are following this girl that lives in a world that when people die, their bodies don't rot. Instead, they reanimate and kind of walk around. So all of these people try to like put things on top of dead bodies to stop them from just like walking around and doing stuff. They're not really zombies, like they don't really attack people, they're just kind of there. So the reason these bodies are reanimating is because the King of Flesh and Blood, or the King of Flesh and Bone, is like a Hades type character, and he doesn't like humans. And no human is able to go into his world to request to stop this. So they do rituals to try to like stop it, but it's not working. Anyway, our main character ends up being dragged via dead horse into the land of the dead, where she is found by the King of Flesh and Bone. And right away, he's like, ooh, human. I'm gonna make you my like plaything and like do whatever I want to you because you're a dumb human and I am like perfect. So he ends up kind of like SAing her. At one point, she is trying to escape him and he breaks both of her legs and he never apologizes for it. I actually think he breaks her legs like 2 or 3 times and he's like, I'm sorry, but like the second time I took your pain away when I broke them, so like my bad. But this is very much watching our main character kind of become a villain instead of watching the villain be good. Like, at the end, they're both kind of villainous, but it was interesting. It was a time. So if you want a very dark fantasy romance that has a little bit of non-con in there, I would check it out. It was definitely unique, but still gonna give it 2 stars. So next up we have The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy, and I really enjoyed this. This is following Heart and Mercy. Heart is this sheriff that kind of goes around and kills essentially zombies, and he brings the bodies to Mercy, who is the head of this like mortuary, and it's their romance. So it ends up kind of being like You Got Mail, but with a Studio Ghibli vibe. So there are all of these like mystical creatures, and it takes place in this fantastical world, but it was really good. I really liked it, and it was spicier than I thought it was gonna be. So yeah, I'm gonna put this with 4 stars. The reason it's like You Got Mail is because Hart is trying to find a friend or someone to relate to him, so he writes this letter, and he doesn't address it to anyone, but it ends up going to Mercy, and when she reads it, she really relates to it, but she has no idea it was written by Hart. So they end up kind of having this pen-pal relationship that then turns into an actual relationship, and it was really good. And next up, I became obsessed with this series, and I'm gonna give it 5 stars. It's Broken Bonds. I know, there are some issues with it, still giving it 5 stars, just because I absolutely loved it. We were following, I believe her name's Ollie, this girl and her chosen bonded. So this is Why Choose, reverse harem, fantasy romance, and I loved every single love interest. Every single love interest is just so distinctly different that it's impossible not to love all of them. And it had a perfect amount of action. So just to give you like an idea of what the book is about, we're following this girl who's in a car with her mother, and her mother's bonded. So in this world, there is typically like one woman, and she has multiple like bonded males. And through this relationship, they're all able to like kind of power each other up. They all have different powers. Unfortunately, Ollie's family ends up being killed in this car crash. And instead of her going back to her bonded, she ends up fleeing and running away. So eventually her bonded track her down. And the first book is very much like enemies to lovers, because they are very upset with her for leaving them. And then it kind of becomes like this political war, and it's so good. I loved it. Highly recommend. Pick it up. I've only read the first 4. I'm going to finish the series hopefully before the end of the year. I have like 2 weeks left, so we will see. All right. Next up, we have, These Twisted Bonds, which is the sequel to These Hollow Vows, which is a YA fantasy romance. Absolutely loved it. My only critique with this is I feel like it could have been 3 books instead of 2, but I still really enjoyed it. I really can't tell you very much about it because it is a sequel, but the first book, These Hollow Vows, is following this girl, Breene, and she lives in a world where the Fae will make trades with humans and try to like grant them wishes, but they're Fae, so they can be kind of tricky. So anyway, Bree tries to stay away from Fae, which becomes impossible when her sister is stolen by the king of the Unseelie court. So she has to travel to the Fae lands, and when she gets there, she meets the prince of the Seelie court, and then a gang of misfits from the Unseelie court, and it goes from there. And it's really good. If you like A Court of Thorns and Roses, I think you will 100% love the Hollow Vow duology. All right, guys, so if everything looks like it moved around a little bit, my camera died. Not only did it die once, it died 3 times. This is now my 3rd time trying to tier rank these last 5 books. I hope it's the last time. I'm a little bit annoyed. But anyway, I believe we're on The Savage and the Swan by Ella Fields. So this is a reimagining of a lot of different stories. It has a little bit of Rumpelstiltskin, but also Beauty and the Beast. We are following this Fae princess, and she is going to be marrying the prince of the human kingdom. And their kingdoms are going to work together in order to go up against the prince of the Unseelie court, who is attacking both their lands. So then the prince of the Unseelie court ends up kidnapping our main character, and it kind of goes from there. So it is enemies to lovers, and I did enjoy the overall story. Like I said, it does have a lot of elements that I felt were unnecessary. I believe our main character can spin thread into gold, but then that element is completely dropped by like the middle of the book. So I just feel like it needed a little bit of editing. My biggest issue, honestly, probably with the book is I listened to this via audio, and the male narrator made some artistic choices that I personally was not a fan of. I hated every time we had the male narrator his point of view. So I am going to put this at 3 stars. However, I think if I read this physically, I might actually put it at 4. The male narrator, not a fan. Ella Fields also just released The Wolf and the Wildflower, and I've been hearing amazing things about that book, so I'll definitely be picking that up. Hopefully before the end of the year. I'm going to try to read it physically. If not, I'll probably read it in the next few months when it's released via audio. So if you see me tapping, it's because I'm tapping the remote of my camera to make sure my camera does not die again. Anyway, moving on. We have House of Sky and Breath. This is going to be controversial. This is going in 3 stars, and it's literally only getting 3 stars because of the ending. I had a lot of issues with this book. I feel like the pacing was very slow. This book was way longer than it needed to be, and we're introduced to so many characters. And also, I feel like the main romance, I didn't like the way where it was going. I honestly liked the side character's romance and the side character more than Hunt and Bryce, and I feel like that wasn't supposed to be the case. So yeah, I have a lot of conflicted feelings about this book. I did think the ending was crazy. I remember throwing the book and like running around my house being freaked out. But yeah, I had a lot of problems with this book. So I was kind of disappointed. I'm very nervous about the 3rd book. Hopefully it makes up for this one. Yeah, we'll see. But anyway, next up is Black Sunshine. So this is a vampire witch romance, and I loved this. So I'm actually gonna put this in 4 stars. So this is following a witch. She's on her 21st birthday. She is being taken to a cabin by her parents, and they're gonna celebrate her 21st birthday. And then a vampire kidnaps her and is like, hey, those people aren't your parents. And not only that, they actually wanna kill you, and you're not really a witch. And it kind of goes from there. It's their romance. I love the 1st book. I read half of the 2nd book, but I am primarily an audiobook listener, so I never finished it. I'm waiting for it to come out via audio. I actually haven't checked in a while. It might now be available. And then I think there's a companion series now, Blood Orange. That might not be the name. I'm pretty sure that's the name though. So I definitely want to check that out because I really, really enjoyed Black Sunshine. Definitely my favorite book written by Karina Halle. And next up we have Ruin of Roses. This is gonna go in 1 star. So I've actually tried rereading this, and it's really the writing. It's not for me. I feel like the sex scenes are very crudely written, and I didn't like it. So this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling with shifters. So this community of shifters has been cursed, and they end up dying at a very early age. So our main character has figured out a way to prolong life by using these roses that are grown in this forbidden forest. So one day when she's trying to get a rose, she ends up being kidnapped by this prince. He takes her back to his castle, and the castle is inhabited by demons. But like I said, the premise is very interesting. The writing just was not for me. I didn't like it at all. So I will not be continuing with the series, unfortunately. But I know a lot of people that really love it, so I would still give it a try. It was personally a me thing. Didn't love the writing. And last up, we should not have that. We should have 2 more. Okay, so last up we have City of Thorns, and I didn't love this. This is an urban fantasy, and I have to accept that I am not a fan of urban fantasy. The only one I really enjoyed was House of Earth and Blood, the 1st book in the Crescent City series. Other than that, most of the time, I don't love it. So this is following this girl whose mother was killed by a demon. Unfortunately, she doesn't have enough money or connections to get into the demon world. That is until she meets a demon at a bar who mistakes her for someone else, and they decide they're gonna help each other out. Now, the thing with this book is I didn't love the romance. I felt like they kind of it wasn't insta-love, but I just wanted a little bit more angst. I wanted a little bit more like cute moments between them or something of that nature for me to really feel connected. But also, the parts of this book I wanted, I feel like happened off page. So like there's a part where the human girl has to go up against a bunch of demons in these trials, and we skip to the very end of the trial, the next page. Like I would have loved to see that happen. So that was my biggest issue. I won't be continuing with the series, but this is another book that I know a lot of people are huge fans of. So I'm gonna put that with 2 stars. All right, and last up, we have Fortuna Swan. So this was actually a reread for me, and I loved it. Kind of a spoiler, I accidentally still had it up there, but definitely 5 stars. So this is following Fortuna. She is a nightmare, and what that means is when she touches you, you see your darkest fears. So Fortuna has been searching for the last 2 years for her brother, and one day this fae shows up on her doorstep and says, hey, I know where your brother is, but if you want to know, you have to marry me. And she agrees, and the series goes from there. It is a little bit darker, but it was so good. So I read the first 3 books when they first released almost 2 years ago at this point. And then I re-listened to the first one via audio, and I really enjoyed it. I really want to finish the series. This is one of the series that I definitely am going to read in 2023. Broken Bonds, Fortuna Swan, Zodiac Academy are all series that I'm definitely going to try to get caught up on. But yeah, so that is my fantasy romance tier rank. Thank you so much for watching. All right, guys, so that is my tier rank. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know down in the comments below what was your absolute favorite fantasy romance that you read this year. And I said this already, I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!